LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 11th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 12 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. If you want to follow along on read my notes that I use, I have my clip list here. There's a link down in the video description to my clip list. I also mention what my topic is, which is, are Republicans crazy? And I picked that topic because if you watch the news summaries I'm going to show you coming up, most of them framed it as, America divided, more divided than ever, more polarized. And, that's one way of framing it, but I actually see the big divide between people who are, into rational governance, mostly, and people who are at least a majority of the Republican Party seems consumed by these crazy conspiracy theories. And I will be showing you several Republicans and some news summaries to back up my contention there, and I will give you 5 Republicans to compare. Former head of the Republican Party, now frequent MSNBC commentator, but still a Republican, Michael Steele. Former governor of New Jersey, Christie, who's an ABC commentator. Governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. I'll have 2 very long clips of him because he actually might be a 2024 Republican presidential contender. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas definitely gives me evidence for the crazy side of the Republican Party, also possible presidential contender in 2024. And then Liz Cheney, not crazy, but evil? I don't know, which is better? Well, we can talk about that when we get to those clips. But I'm going to do the political comedy a little different tonight, which I'll explain after I show the usual first clip. This is about Florida man Matt Gaetz, and from Saturday Night Live last night, includes an actual clip of Matt Gaetz speaking in Florida this weekend from last night's Weekend Update, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Well, our favorite Florida congressman, Matt Gaetz, is back in the news, but this time it's good. I'm kidding, it's still the sex stuff. Matt Gaetz, who looks like all the dudes from American Pie combined, reportedly sent $900 on Venmo to an alleged sex trafficker, who then forwarded that same exact amount to 3 young women in payments labeled tuition and school, which, if true, would make him the only congressman actually helping with student loans. But at least Gaetz is taking the allegations seriously. That's why yesterday he spoke at the Women for America First Summit, which is a nice change to see women pay for an hour with Matt Gaetz. My favorite moment was when Gaetz pointed out how much support he's getting from other politicians.
This past week has been full of encouragement from President Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Jim Jordan.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Did you think those were good character references? Who was next on his list? The ghost of Jeffrey Epstein?
So some of those jokes were good, and actually on the subject of the character references there, not the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein, but Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan and Donald Trump himself, those are the exact kind of crazy Republicans I was talking about earlier. I was also reading the live comments along the way. I guess when I was introducing that last clip, you all could hear Dash mewing off in the distance. I was trying so hard not to get distracted, but what can you do when you live with the silly animals? And I will have a bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip at the end, as usual. But I wanted to talk about those character references, like I was saying, and use an actual news clip here. This is former head of the Republican Party, Michael Steele, talking to Jonathan Capehart on the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, talking specifically about how the Republican Party has become kind of this scam, this grift, where people are trying to raise money and get reelected, but not have real rational governing ideas, like I was talking about earlier, and This is Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically is mentioned in this clip because apparently she raised over $3 million in 30 days, even though she has like the least amount of power of anyone in the Congress because she doesn't even have committee assignments. But anyway, I'll talk about that clip a little more after we watch it. This is, like I said, from MSNBC's The Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart this morning over here.
And speaking of when, Chairman Steele, in the less than a minute that we have left, Soledad just mentioned fundraising. Like they're all clutching to former President Trump because, they need him to raise money. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia with no committee assignments because of conspiracy theories and racist stuff she said, she reported that she raised $3.2 million in the last quarter. 98% of that money came from donations that are under $200. Yep. So does that actually feed into what Perry was saying and what Soledad was agreeing about? And that is, the Republican Party isn't done, and that actually there is a groundswell there for the conspiracy theorists, for the racists in the party to actually take over the House and the Senate in 2022.
Oh, absolutely. I was talking with a number of fundraisers this week, as a matter of fact, who were talking about that small dollar program that they have in place, and it is very effective. And it is the extremes that are raising the money. The Adam Kinzingers and folks like that are, they're doing okay, but they're not raising $3 million in 30 days. That's the difference. And so to Soledad's point, that's where the culture wars come in. That's the cultural fight played out and realized in the dollars that are raised. Understand this. This is all very cynical. At the end of the day, they don't give a rat's patootie about these issues. Marjorie Taylor Greene is just a jacked up Congresswoman wannabe who at the end of the day is as crazy as hell, but she can raise $3 million. Whereas common sense, focused, disciplined, sort of, I want to try to govern the country type of Republicanism is sitting there trying to eke along a dollar at a time. So that kind of tells you where the dollar fight is, and the Trumpists are winning.
Chairman Steele, Rats Patootie. We're going to have to talk about that offline. Michael Steele, Soledad O'Brien, Perry.
Rats Patootie. Oh, and by the way, the source of that Saturday Night Live clip and of the MSNBC Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart and all the clips, source of all the clips, it links down in the video description. If you want to watch the full Saturday Night Live, it's down there. But I like that Rats Patootie thing, and the whole grift idea, and the whole idea that the more extreme Republican ideas are what it brings out the base for elections, gets the small dollar donors to give Marjorie Taylor Greene over $3 million in 30 days, and gets Republicans elected so that the conspiracy theory crazy Republicans are, like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan. They're the ones who don't really want to get anything done, but are taking over the party. In fact, John Boehner, who just is on a book tour because he just wrote this memoir, apparently said that Jim Jordan, all he ever did was destroy things, and that's basically where the Republican Party is the point I'm making. But the final, part of my troika of political comedy clips here, you'll see the panel found this hilarious Christie's take on the Matt Gaetz clip. You saw a Matt Gaetz clip in the Saturday Night Live clip I showed you. This, I think, is the Matt Gaetz clip that got more play than any other part of his weird speech to the America First women that you heard Saturday Night Live talking about with those jokes. And I'll tell you why I find Christie's reaction particularly funny after we watch that final of my 3 political comedy clips together over here.
One of former President Trump's top acolytes in the House, Matt Gaetz, facing a world of trouble. House Ethics Committee opening up an investigation into this week. It turns out that one of his associates in Florida may be turning against him in the sex trafficking case. Gaetz defiant.
So when you see the leaks and the lies and the falsehoods and the smears, when you see the anonymous sources and insiders forecasting my demise, know this. They aren't really coming for me. They're coming for you. I'm just in the way.
Look, what I've learned over 7 years as a federal prosecutor is the investigation will yield what it will yield. And we won't have to speculate anymore. You know, if Greenberg winds up cooperating, we're going to know that. And we're going to hear what he's got to say, and we're going to be able to evaluate the evidence when it comes forward. And whatever Matt Gaetz said in his speech about you, and they're after you, not me, no. They're after you. Okay? I can say as a prosecutor, they're not looking to prosecute any of the people in your district. They're investigating you.
People woke up Sunday morning for that insight. Right? Go back to your coffee, relax. They're not looking for you. Look at that guy over there.
For everybody in his district in Florida, rest easy. They're not after you. They're after him.
So, yeah, what I actually thought was so funny about that clip, I mean, they thought it was hilarious, but when Matt Gaetz was in that clip that was most shown about him saying they're coming for you, he's doing what I think the Republicans accused Cory Booker of doing a couple years ago, trying to have his I am Spartacus moment, where he, says, I am Spartacus, and like tries to get it going, like pretending someone else is saying, I am Spartacus, but then Christie like stands up and says, no, dude, you are Spartacus. Like, you're the one they're coming for. So that's my troika of political comedy clips. You can let me know what you think about that. And now I'm going to go into the news summaries. And as usual, I have them put in order from longest to the shortest. This week on NBC News' Meet the Press, Chuck Todd did not have a long pre-recorded news package. So let's see, looking at the clip list here, it looks like that's even the last. Yeah, it's the shortest of the news summary. So Chuck Todd has the short, no package, and the shortest news summary this week for those keeping score at home. And the longest one is actually, and I thought this was pretty good, if, given the framing I was talking about of like country divided. This is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, briefly from George Stephanopoulos, and then Jonathan Karl does this longer summary, like I said, talking about the long-term challenges of America divided, which, as I was saying at the beginning, I think may be a misframing, because it's really the divide is between rational governing people and crazy people is the real divide, not Democrats and Republicans. It just happens to be that the Republicans are being overrun by crazy conspiracy theory people. That's the thesis of today's video. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section as we watch the news summary from ABC's This Week This Morning together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. 81 days ago, President Biden promised to attack the pandemic and its economic fallout with speed and urgency. The relief package has passed. Nearly a quarter of the country fully vaccinated, more than 4.6 million doses yesterday alone. And the economy is coming back. The task now, addressing America's long-term challenges. With Congress and the country still divided, the degree of difficulty is high. Our roundtable ready to take stock of where things stand as we near Biden's 100-day mark. Chief Washington correspondent John Karl starts us off.
We choose hope over fear, truth over lies, and yes, unity over division.
During his campaign, Joe Biden offered himself as a candidate of unity and moderation, somebody who would work with Republicans, even suggesting he'd be a transitional president.
Look, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else.
Nearly 3 months in, President Biden has blazed a different path, aiming to be a transformational president, acting to erase his predecessor's legacy and using his narrow Democratic majority to ram through the biggest expansion of government since LBJ.
We need to remember the government isn't some foreign force in a distant capital. No, it's us.
At first, Biden did reach out, at least symbolically. The very first members of Congress he invited to the Oval Office were 10 Senate Republicans. He invited them to talk about a bipartisan COVID relief bill, but Republicans weren't willing to go anywhere near as big as Biden wanted.
I would predict that not a single Republican will support the $1.9 trillion plan.
So he signed the most expensive bill by far ever to pass Congress without a single vote from the opposition party.
This will do more to end child poverty in America than anything we've ever done.
Biden is now trying to go even bigger, proposing what would be the biggest public works program ever, and big tax increases on corporations and the wealthy to pay for it. He's selling it as an infrastructure plan, but it's more, including big investments in roads, bridges, airports, and high-speed rail, but also a coast-to-coast network of electric vehicle charging stations, broadband for rural areas, replacing 100% of lead pipes in the country, and $400 billion to care for the elderly and people with disabilities. Once again, he says he wants to work with Republicans.
I'm going to bring Republicans to the White House.
But Republican leaders are now in a position of all-out opposition.
This is a bold, left-wing administration. I don't think they have a mandate to do what they're doing.
Even those 10 moderates who came to the White House last time around are digging in, responding this week to Biden's invitation by saying that the White House used their last talks to, quote, justify its go-it-alone strategy. And Republicans are finding it can pay off to be the party of no in the face of a big progressive agenda. Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy boasting this week he raised more than $27 million in the first quarter of 2021, more than any House Republican has ever raised in a single quarter. Still hanging over the Republicans, Donald Trump, slowly emerging from his exile in Mar-a-Lago, still clinging to the lie that the election was stolen from him, and even so, the most in-demand endorsement by far for Republicans running in 2022. All that explains why Biden may want to and may need to bypass Republicans. But then the real challenge could be among Democrats. Joe Manchin of deep red West Virginia, who knows just how powerful he can be in a 50-50 Senate, took his stand in an op-ed this week, saying Democrats, quote, must avoid the temptation to abandon our Republican colleagues. So as the clock ticks down to Biden's first 100 days in office, at least one voice in the party is saying not so fast. Republicans may not be willing to deal, but as long as Joe Manchin is holding out, Biden will have no choice but to try.
Thanks to John Carl for that. Let's talk about it on our roundtable. We are joined by Christie, Rahm Emanuel.
And I already showed you the Christie clip. Usually I promise an upcoming clip when I do that, but you saw Christie's reaction earlier. I also was checking the live comments along the way, and I saw people agreeing with me. I saw that both Lulu Girl and Sinful Solutions both gave me super chat contributions, thanking me for putting this together, and I thank you for watching and supporting my live clip roundup. I also saw, I was talking about how Republicans were being taken over by conspiracy theories. And I saw I'm scrolling now through the comments. Who was it? Oh, yeah, it was Christopher L. Perez Cruz says Russia was a conspiracy theory. Well, I mean, if by conspiracy theory you mean not true, there were quite a bit of, I hate to go off on this tangent. I'll try to be brief, but when they say that Russia, the whole thing was a hoax and the media shouldn't have covered it. Well, you have to keep in mind, Don Jr. did have the Trump Tower meeting with agents of Russia to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. That was a real fact, is that it wasn't a prosecutable crime, but it was Russian collusion. Paul Manafort, convicted of other crimes and then pardoned by Trump, gave Trump campaign polling data to Konstantin Kalimnik, a Russian agent, and because Paul Manafort never cooperated and eventually got pardoned, that part of the investigation never went anywhere. But why did the Trump campaign give polling data to Konstantin Kalimnik, a Russian agent? We know Russia hacked the DNC and distributed a whole bunch of information, and they did it through WikiLeaks. Now, WikiLeaks is a publisher, and because of the First Amendment, we shouldn't be prosecuting publishers of hacked information. But guess what? Roger Stone, a close confidant of Donald Trump, he coordinated the release of that Russian hacked material through WikiLeaks. So he had contact with WikiLeaks. That definitely came out in the Roger Stone trial. More information about that also blocked because Trump pardoned Roger Stone. So those are all real, actual facts about Russia collusion that, I mean, I guess conspiracy can mean when people act together for a criminal purpose. Now, none of that was prosecuted by the Mueller investigation. I kind of explained along the way for most of them, and I don't want to go any more deep into the weeds on that, but I just wanted to respond to that one live comment, Russia, Russia, Russia. There was stuff there. That doesn't mean... the Mueller report basically said that the Russia part wasn't prosecutable. They said Trump was prosecutable for obstruction of justice, although said it without saying it. But anyway, that is so much old news, but I felt like I had to respond to that comment, and now I will get to the next news summary, which isn't on this topic at all. This is from CBS, and CBS News' Face the Nation, as I said, has done the longest, best, earliest coverage of COVID-19 coronavirus crisis. Back before anyone else was covering it, I was saying, are they like over covering this, or are they the only one covering what's going to be the biggest story of the year? Like a year ago plus, I was saying that about CBS, which could be called the coronavirus broadcasting system, I guess. And to prove it, here is Margaret Brennan talking about COVID-19 mainly in her brief introduction to Mark Strassman, who's back, and he's not in Atlanta, Georgia, where I've talked about many weeks. He was like waiting to talk to someone from the CDC during the Trump administration, and for some reason he always seems to be reporting from there. But I think for some reason, and that reason is probably golf, he's reporting from somewhere else, as you'll see at the end of this clip from CBS News' Face the Nation that I will talk about with you a little more. Sorry for that long digression. After we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin today with caution and optimism. Although there is concern about the rising number of COVID-19 cases, especially among children, Saturday saw a record 4.6 million vaccinations. Nearly 71 million adults have been fully vaccinated. When it comes to unemployment, we're still far from where we were pre-pandemic, but as Mark Strassman reports, the job market is looking much brighter in some key sectors.
And just like that, jobs are back.
We are hiring on the spot. We're looking for over 40 guest room attendants.
Credit a burst in spending from a nation no longer in hibernation. A double injection of adrenaline from the recent $1.9 trillion stimulus package, and roughly 3 million more Americans getting vaccinated every day.
The economy has taken off like a rocket. A lot of pent-up demand. People anxious to get out of their houses to get back to normal.
But in many sectors, the new normal for employers is a labor shortage. Many restaurants and hotels have had to raise their hourly wages, and some chains now offer signing bonuses, not to executives, but to cooks and kitchen staff.
COVID America's runaway unemployment crisis is over. We're seeing the return of job fairs like this one.
Go get your vaccinations and come out and get a job.
Nationwide, more than 1 in 3 Americans have had at least one shot of a vaccine. In many moments and ways, America feels back. Baseball fans crowded ballparks. 12 states have lifted their mask mandates. But other states are in deep COVID trouble again.
I don't think I'm too optimistic in saying this. I think it's the fourth and final wave.
COVID's stalking upper Midwest states, Michigan especially. Cases have spiked 7-fold since late February. Hospitalizations increased by more than 4 times. So far, Governor Gretchen Whitmer has resisted calls to shut down the state again.
We're offering to surge federal personnel, including CDC response teams, FEMA, DOD, and other federal personnel to support vaccination efforts and get more shots in arms.
Complicating that effort, a vaccine shortage starting this week. America's supply of the Johnson & Johnson single-shot vaccine will plunge 85% because of contamination issues at that production plant in Baltimore. 15 million doses had to be tossed, a clear setback.
Our biggest concern right now is this bad news we got from the feds that they're going to be dramatically slashing our supply of vaccines.
That will delay what epidemiologists want, herd immunity, the ultimate booster shot for a post-COVID America.
Mark Strassman reporting from Augusta, Georgia this morning. Scott Pelley.
So what do you think? Is he in Augusta instead of Atlanta because of golf? Like I said, probably. And probably, like I said before I showed the clip, CBS is really covering what historically will be the biggest story from all these weeks, and sort of following up on my topic from last week was COVID fourth wave. And you saw last week I showed the argument between Michael Osterholm and Scott Gottlieb as to whether it was going to be a fourth wave or just like a regional surge. And so far it's like a Great Lakes regional surge in COVID cases, especially in Michigan, but all around the Great Lakes region. And whether that's going to be all that happens or if there'll be a true fourth wave, I guess remains to be seen. But that's important reporting, like I said. And I got my second COVID shot on Monday, so I'm like 8 days away from being having full efficacy of my Pfizer vaccine. For what it's worth, I know I saw people in the comments talking about getting vaccinated, so that's an important thing for everyone to do. People shouldn't relax restrictions, and I also like the way Face the Nation concentrated there on the economic impact and how things seem to be getting better economically, but that could all be wiped away if people don't get vaccinated and don't engage in the mitigation measures like social distancing and mask wearing. A clip I didn't show is from the head of the Federal Reserve, who's going to be on 60 Minutes saying just that they're very optimistic about the economy for the coming year, but it depends on getting COVID under control. So that's a important issue. Is it Jerome Powell? Jerome Powell, is that the head of the Fed who's on 60 Minutes? I may not have that name right, but you can let me know down in the comment section while we watch the next news summary together. And it's kind of like the ABC one where it's like divided. It's a divided nation. Biden has, with big plans, but the way they frame it on Fox News Sunday, I guess this is, it might not be political bias. This might be the bias I talk about that all the corporate news media outlets have when they have an exclusive guest. They bias their news coverage toward their exclusive guest. And so the exclusive guest on Fox News Sunday this week is the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. And so they term all of Biden's plans, the Biden Democrat, it's all framed as Biden versus Texas, and Texas represents the half of the country that are, the strong conservative Republicans, not crazy Republicans, but I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Chris Wallace and then Rich Edson. And they really play up the immigration crisis, which has been a huge theme on Fox News. Maybe I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. If there's a ground zero in the battle between President Biden and his conservative critics, it's the state of Texas. That's where the surge of illegal immigration across our border is happening. It's where you'll find the strongest pushback to White House calls for mask mandates and continued lockdowns. And it's where you'll hear the loudest challenges to the president's executive action on guns. Today, our lead guest is the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. In a moment, we'll have an exclusive interview. But first, let's bring in Rich Edson from McAllen, Texas, on the border with Mexico, on the growing tensions between the nation's capital and the Lone Star State.
Chris, this border surge is at the center of Texas Republicans' biggest fight with the Biden administration so far.
Customs and Border Protection says agents picked up nearly 19,000 unaccompanied children last month, a record, and stressing government holding facilities.
This is a self-inflicted wound, a manufactured crisis brought on by President Biden. We're going to see more migrant surge than I think I've ever seen.
Texas officials say they're investigating reports of abuse of children at a migrant facility. The Federal Department of Health and Human Services says it will continue investigating incidents. Across the state in Arlington, baseball's opening day that looked normal. That's unique. The Texas Rangers is the major's only team to open a full house after Governor Greg Abbott allowed businesses to operate at full capacity. Texas, also home to another American shooting. Authorities are charging the accused gunman of murder and other charges after killing a man and wounding others at a cabinet company where he worked. As President Biden announced a series of gun executive orders.
I'm going to use all the resources at my disposal as president to keep the American people safe from gun violence.
The president also called on Congress to approve a series of gun measures. Here at the border, a third trip for the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Local reports say he'll visit 2 Texas border towns Thursday. Chris?
Rich Edson reporting from the border in McAllen, Texas. Rich, thank you. And joining us now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
And I will have an extensive clip of Greg Abbott as part of the strong evidence for the thesis of this video that the Republican Party is being taken over by crazy conspiracy theorists or extremists or whatever, Trumpists, whatever you want to call them. And Greg Abbott, of all the Republicans I'm going to show, falls most into that category, I guess. But I did see people in the live comments talking about the I think it was Tom Trask who said so-called border crisis, which I actually did a video. Border crisis ? Was my main topic a couple weeks ago, and I think that's the wrong framing of the issue. By the time all these refugees get to our border, the fact that refugees are washing up on our shores, that's not the real crisis. It's what's causing the refugees to wash up on our shores. I've talked about that multiple times over the last few weeks, so I just wanted to refute the framing of Fox News Sunday and Fox News ad infinitum for weeks and weeks. It's like one of their main topics, it seems. And moving on to the next news summary, it's Jake Tapper, CNN State of the Union, where he tells us every week what is the State of the Union. And this week, the State of the Union is divided as ever. It's the same framing. And I guess I should give some kudos to the Fox News Sunday news summary for bringing up the gun issue, but they're using it as a way to divide Biden from the conservative Republican critics, and represented by Texas in that last news summary. I think divided as ever, like I said, is the State of the Union from Jake Tapper. So he uses that same framing, but I think he does a little more to emphasize the craziness of the Republicans causing that division, or especially the lies that came out of Florida and Trump land this weekend in the penultimate news summary I'll discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is as divided as ever. Former President Trump is back, and he's about the same. In a speech at a Republican National Committee retreat with donors and party leaders last night at Mar-a-Lago, Trump called Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell a, quote, dumb son of a bitch, unquote, for ultimately opposing Trump's big election lie, for upholding democracy. Former President Trump also went after his vice president, Mike Pence, according to a source in the room, for certifying the election results on January 6. Not surprisingly, Trump did not say a word to condemn the violent insurrection he helped incite that day. And as the former president excoriates Republican leaders in Washington, the Biden administration is trying for a second time to reach out to them. Tomorrow, President Biden will meet with the Democratic and Republican members of House and Senate to discuss his $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan. The president this week said, quote, compromise is inevitable, but he warned that his team will not be open to inaction. Reaching any sort of compromise, of course, will be difficult. Republicans are already pushing back on the administration's plan, saying it's too sweeping. It goes way beyond the traditional idea of infrastructure, not to mention the tax hikes, even as some Democrats push to make the bill more progressive. Joining me now to discuss, one of the cabinet members leading the effort on infrastructure, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
And Pete Buttigieg was on a couple shows. I didn't take any clips of him because I'm trying to highlight crazy Republicans, and that'll be after I get to the final news summary next. I will get to those Republicans of different varieties of crazy, but I think I pretty much pre-criticized, or actually pre-lauded that clip from Jake Tapper. I don't know, I think Jake Tapper, he's only on half the time now on State of the Union. He switches off with Dana Bash, and I like Dana Bash okay, but Jake Tapper, a lot of times, especially his polemics at the end, where he used to do his State of the Cartoonian, now he gives a political polemic or whatever, and I like Jake. He doesn't have as many haters on my channel as Chuck Todd. Everybody hates Chuck Todd for some reason, and Chuck Todd is going to be the shortest of the news summaries, which is unusual for him this week. It's just a little over a minute. You'll see some of the same framing about America divided. He starts off with this old thing about how we're so divided because someone who's 80% my friend in politics is now my enemy, but it's like an old saying, so how can we be more divided when it's an old saying from an old Meet the Press show? Anyway, I'll talk about all that. I'll talk about what Chuck Todd has to say a little more with you after we watch that final news summary together over here.
And a good Sunday morning, the writer David French once said right here on Meet the Press that Americans are so dug in politically that if you are 80% my friend, you're 100% my enemy. Today, the personal has become political. In just the past few days, liberals cheered Major League Baseball's decision to move its All-Star game out of Georgia because of the state's new, more restrictive voting laws, while conservatives have called for boycotting baseball, Coca-Cola, and Delta for opposing those measures. Where you stand on vaccine passports and masks has become a marker for whom you stand with politically. Washington is even arguing over the definition of the word infrastructure. It's a debate with a $4 billion price tag. And now our differences no longer stop at the water's edge. We're polarized, left versus right, on immigration, on how to confront China, on whether Russia interfered in the 2016 and 2020 election, and so much more. Joe Biden won the presidential election, promising to bring us together, and the person who has worked most closely with him over the years on foreign policy is Tony Blinken. He's Mr. Biden's Secretary of State. And Secretary Blinken joins me now. Mr. Secretary, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thanks. And I don't have a Tony Blinken clip because it doesn't fit my topic of crazy Republicans. But actually, I've talked about some of Chuck Todd's strengths and weaknesses. I think he is very well prepared, and he had a lot of good questions for Tony Blinken on a lot of different issues, and got policy statements, Biden foreign policy statements on a lot of important issues, and that's well worth watching. Meet the Press is available at a link down in the video description. Not so great with the follow-ups, and I don't know if he did a great job with the follow-up with Asa Hutchinson. He at least got him to, Asa Hutchinson, and I'm going to show you two long clips of Asa Hutchinson. I mean, he's not a crazy conspiracy theory Republican. He is an evangelical Christian, and so he did sign a couple bills keeping, for example, keeping transgender athletes out of sports in Arkansas. But then he vetoed a bill. Well, it's all in the introduction here from Chuck Todd, and Chuck Todd questions him on it, I think pretty well at the beginning, but not great with the follow-up, and I will talk about that with you a little more after we watch this first of two Asa Hutchinson clips. I don't know, he's sort of, you can tell me, is he crazy Republican, or is, that's definitely debatable, and you're going to have two clips worth of statements from Asa Hutchinson to debate it with, and we'll watch the first one together over here.
Welcome back. One of the weapons Republicans are using with an eye towards retaking power is to tar Democrats on a number of cultural issues. But sometimes Republicans get caught in that crossfire. When Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson vetoed a bill that would ban gender-affirming treatments for transgender youth, the state's veto-proof Republican majorities in the House and Senate overrode his veto by substantial margins. In a Washington Post op-ed last week, Hutchinson wrote, "I'm being attacked by some of my Republican colleagues for not being pure enough on social issues and for vetoing a bill that limited access to health care for transgender youth." Governor Hutchinson joins me now. Governor, welcome back to Meet the Press. I'm curious, this was the third bill targeting transgender youth in some form, and the issue in some form, that had passed the legislature. Did you veto this third bill because of the specifics of the bill, or was this also, or how much of it was enough already with these bills that seem to be in search of a problem that didn't exist?
Well, each bill has to stand on its own. I signed two that I thought made sense. One was girls in sports, trying to protect women's sports. The other one was supporting medical conscience, that doctors can claim a conscience reason if they want to deny a particular procedure, but they have to do emergency care. And so those are two bills that I signed. The third one was not well done. It did not protect the youth. It interfered with the government getting into the lives of transgender youth as well as their parents and the decisions that doctors made. And to me, it's about compassion, but it is also about having the laws make sense in a limited role of government. And that's the case that I made in the Washington Post column, that as Republicans, we need to get back and ask the question, is this the appropriate role of government? Are we restraining ourselves?
Look, you've got quite a few, and your state legislature is not the only one like this, but you've got quite a few of what I think would be described as loosely culture war bills, or what I'm going to describe as culture war bills. A bill that got withdrawn but wanted to ban anything that had to do with the 1619 project. You couldn't teach it in schools, or another one that would have banned tied school funding in case you did this stuff. And I'm just curious, why do you think there is so much focus among some members of the legislature on issues that, you tell me, is this really bubbling up in Arkansas schools?
Well, it's not, but the fear is about the future, and the fear is also that we're losing our culture. And the case I make, though, is that just because you want to keep things as they have been, perhaps, you don't need to use the instrument of the law. You don't need to use the state to accomplish that purpose in every instance. There is the church, there is society, there is your community, and that's where the culture is impacted or reflected in the future. And so, again, there's too much. As a Republican Party, it's the principles of limited government, and it's pushing freedom and choice in the free market. That's what the party is about. We've got to apply those principles even when it comes to the social war.
But I'm curious if you're now, if the voters inside the Republican Party don't.
So, like I said, I think Chuck Todd did a good job with his prepared material about culture war issues, but he kind of let Asa Hutchinson get away with saying that he was being moderate by banning trans girls from girls' sports in Arkansas, never following up with a question Jake Tapper asked. I'm not going to show that Jake Tapper clip because I want to show a different thing he asked Asa Hutchinson about. But Jake Tapper followed up and said, well, you know, there's never been an instance of anyone being harmed by trans girls being in girls' sports, taking away any title or opportunity from any other girl in Arkansas, yet you signed that bill. That, you know, that's something Jake Tapper asked. Chuck Todd never asked that. But like I said, he had like well-prepared questions about the culture war issues in Arkansas, and that's kind of part of my whole theme here, that and what Michael Steele was talking about, how by going to the extremes and stoking the base with these culture war issues, they can raise money, they can get reelected, especially in gerrymandered districts, they can take over the Republican Party, even if it's a minority party, even if it's not enough to take back the House or the Senate. They can run the Republican Party and have a money-raising machine, but it's not really about anything that most Americans care about or affects. I mean, the bills that Asa Hutchinson signed, all it did was hurt a very few number of trans girls in Arkansas, and I don't think it helped anybody. That's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But this next part is Jake Tapper asking Asa Hutchinson more directly about Donald Trump's threat to the Republican Party, and specifically quoting things that he said you heard briefly described in the CNN State of the Union news summary I showed a few minutes ago. Well, this is Jake Tapper really drilling down on Asa Hutchinson as to where he stands in the crazy conspiracy Republican Party that he apparently wants to be a future candidate. Well, actually, Jake Tapper later asked him if he was going to run for president. He said, too soon, too far away for me to answer that question, but I think he's running. You can let me know what you think after we watch the second, even longer Asa Hutchinson clip from CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
Former President Trump's speech last night in Florida at an RNC donor retreat. Trump again repeated the dangerous lie that he won the November election. That's not true. He called the results BS. He blasted Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as a dumb son of a bitch, pardon my language, but I'm quoting him, for not blocking the Electoral College certification. According to a person in the room, Trump received huge applause from the crowd, which was top Republican officials and donors. Does this concern you that your party continues to shape itself around the grievances and lies of one man?
Well, anything that's divisive is a concern and is not helpful for us fighting the battles in Washington and at the state level. In some ways, it's not a big deal what he said, but at the same time, whenever it draws attention, we don't need that. We need unity. We need to be focused together. We have slim majorities or slim numbers in Washington, and we got battles to fight, so we need to get beyond that.
Yeah, you have slim minorities in Washington, partly because then President Trump, discouraged Republicans from voting in Georgia. In his new memoir, your former House colleague, you served in the House, John Boehner, writes that the current Republican Party is unrecognizable to him. He writes, quote, I don't even think I could get elected in today's Republican Party anyway. I don't think Ronald Reagan could either. You are not dissimilar from Boehner in the fact that you're a pro-business, small government, Reagan conservative. Is this still your Republican Party?
Well, it is, and you think about the Republican Party today, we do need to remind ourselves, let's get back to our principles. Let's stop the personality divisions that we have and focus on really the historic role that we've played, which is a voice for smaller government, not bigger government, not government solutions, but free enterprise solutions. And that's while I'm also a social conservative, I do believe we have to balance that with the important question, is this a fight that government needs to get in, or is this a role of the church, or is this the restraint of government that we need to not only preach but to practice as well? And that led me to the veto that you described. It's a conservative position to say that's not the role of government. It is compassionate to say we care for all our young people, whether they're trans youth or otherwise, we care for them, and that's the message of compassion and conservatism that we need to have as a party.
Well, Trump targeted you for vetoing that bill that would have let the government into the office where a doctor is treating a transgender teen, and Trump dismissed you as a lightweight rhino. He said, quote, bye-bye, Asa, that's the end of him. You're also under intense criticism from right-wing media, and Republican state legislators easily overturned your veto. What do you make of the blowback you've received from the Republican Party?
Well, anytime you go against the grain, you're going to get that kind of blowback. I think it's healthy for our society. I think it's helpful for our party to have that kind of vigorous debate about an important issue. And to me, this is about the future of our party. Are we going to be a narrow party that expresses ourselves in intolerant ways, or are we going to be a broad-based party that shows conservative principles but also compassion in dealing with some of the most difficult issues that parents face, that individuals face? And at some point, I had to say, I've got to remind my wonderful Republican colleagues that we are the party of Ronald Reagan that believes in a limited role of government. And let's just ask that question. Sure, I sign pro-life bills, and I know that there's a role for government even in the social issues, but we have to fundamentally ask ourselves, do we need to do this? Is there a better way? Is this something that we need to leave to the hand in the home or in the church? our faith leaders to handle? Is this calling out for a government solution? We're fighting that in Washington. Let's fight it also in our state capitals and and fight for the principles of our party.
A lot of Arkansas Republicans are really focused.
So yeah, I've given you a little over 3.5 and a little over 4.5, so a little over 8 minutes of Asa Hutchinson, who I think will try to be one of the leaders of the non-Trump wing of the Republican Party in the 2024 presidential election. Even though, like I said later, Jake Tapper asked him and he said, "Oh, that's so far away, can't tell you," but he's probably already planning, I would expect. And I would also expect that of the governor in this next clip, who I think shows the more Trumpian, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, I also believe will be one of the contenders, also in the crazy Trump wing. But Ron DeSantis wasn't on any of the shows this morning. Greg Abbott was. And now, to his credit, Chris Wallace starts off with a great question, and I'll spoil it for you. It's kind of, I won't give you all the details, but one of the things I've noticed from a lot of Republicans, and I taught when I did my border crisis, so-called border crisis topic live stream a couple weeks ago, I was talking about all the Republicans going down there and like worrying about the fate of these kids all of a sudden, when they never really cared during the Trump administration. And that's basically what Chris Wallace points out, that there were a lot of thousands of accusations of mistreatment of undocumented immigrant children in facilities during the Trump administration, but Greg Abbott is all of a sudden up in arms that there are sexual abuse charges in a facility in San Antonio recently where undocumented children are being held. And that's definitely true. And the problem is, and I'll pre-criticize the clip, which some people criticize me for pre-criticizing the clip. So if you want to, right now would be the time to pre-criticize me for pre-criticizing the clip. But the problem with Chris Wallace's cross-examination is he does say there, thousands of these mistreatment allegations against undocumented children during the Trump administration, but then he lets Governor Abbott get away with saying, "Oh, but that was all different." One of the reasons he said, I love this reason, because Trump was talking to me all the time, so that was one reason why it's different. Like, I'm sure he could call up Biden if he wanted to. It's probably, but then the other thing is he says that all these like jurisdictional differences, but I know that there were sexual abuse allegations in Texas under the Trump administration, and Chris Wallace never follows up with that. He does follow up with some other crazy Republican positions on guns, and then after the clip I'm going to show you, he kind of gives praise to the governor of Texas for opening up the state of Texas too fast and so far having no consequences. But I'll talk about that after I show the clip that, like I said before, you saw about 8 minutes of Asa Hutchinson, and now you're going to see about 6.5 minutes of Greg Abbott. Definitely, as I said earlier, giving support to the thesis of this video that Republicans are kind of crazy, and Greg Abbott is one of the leaders on the crazy side of the party that is in ascension over in this clip.
Chris. Let's talk about those dire consequences. You made news this week reporting that there are cases of sexual abuse at the Freeman Coliseum in San Antonio, Texas, that houses right now more than 1,600 children. But the head of a nonprofit that provides legal services to immigrants said this: the only reason why Abbott is now acting like he cares about the children in these facilities is for political reasons. Governor, there were thousands of complaints of sexual abuse at migrant shelters during the Trump years. Not to say that what's going on now is right, but we couldn't find one instance of you complaining and calling that out when President Trump was president.
Sure. There are multiple differences between what happened in the Trump administration and what is happening now. First, the Trump administration remained in constant communication with me and with my office and let us know what was going on. Second, I saw reports about exactly what you're talking about and saw that those reports were filed with federal agencies. The one that I talked about earlier this past week were reports that were filed with state agencies, the Texas Health and Human Services Commission and the Department of Protective and Child Services, which is basically Child Protective Services. And so we have a duty to respond to any complaint about child sexual abuse in Texas, as well as to investigate it. And that's exactly what I did to make sure it was addressed. Chris, also, however, I must make clear that in addition to the complaints that we received, also the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, Bexar County is where San Antonio and that Freeman Coliseum is, they have already responded to at least 3 complaints of sexual abuse taking place there in San Antonio. But don't fall prey to Democrats or others saying, well, Abbott didn't complain about this in the past. What they need to focus on is exactly what I called attention to last month in Dallas, Texas, where I pointed out then that there were going to be instances of child sex abuse taking place. And today, the Biden administration has done nothing to address these situations that will lead only to more allegations of child sex abuse.
Governor, I want to switch subjects on you. The president announced regulations this week on ghost guns. He wants the Justice Department to publish model red flag legislation for states to consider. You tweeted this after the president's action. Biden is threatening our Second Amendment rights. He just announced a new liberal power grab to take away our guns. The president anticipated that argument that you made there. Take a look.
Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments.
Governor, is there any gun control, any limits on guns that you would accept?
Well, let me mention a couple of things. One is I think that there is no acceptable way that a president, by executive order, can infringe upon Second Amendment rights or alter Second Amendment rights. Second, if the president wanted to do something more than show, if the president really wanted to do something substantively, what he really could do by executive order is to eliminate the backlog of complaints that have already been filed about gun crimes that have taken place. You probably know what NICS is, which is the background check organization. Back in 2018, NICS received 122,000 complaints about people providing false information when they tried to buy a gun. They sent those to the ATF. The ATF sent 12,000. Well, this is important. They sent 12,000 on to U.S. attorneys. U.S. attorneys prosecuted 12. Here's my point. By executive action, the president could cut down on gun crimes if all he did was to tell his executive branch to start prosecuting the gun crimes that have already been sent to the federal government.
But Governor, the reason he has to go to executive action is because Republicans in Congress will block any legislation. Let's put up the numbers of what we're talking about here. There have already been 10 mass killings by gun already this year, and we're just in April. In each of those cases, at least 4 victims died. Just this week, in your state of Bryan, Texas, a gunman killed 1 person and wounded at least 5 others. Let's not talk about executive action. Whether it's expanding background checks, whether it is passing red flag laws, is there anything that you would accept?
Well, first, let me tell you about Bryan, Texas, and I'm going to tell you something that happened in Bryan, Texas that will answer your question. The shooting in Bryan, Texas, I went to the hospital where victims and their families were the night of the shooting. And we hugged and we cried and we talked to them about it. And as I was talking to family members of one of the victims, they said, "Governor, please, do not allow this shooting to strip us of our Second Amendment rights, and they explain exactly why. They said the Second Amendment is there for the purpose of self-defense, and we need that self-defense now more than ever because of the cartels coming into our state, because of gangs that are operating in the neighborhoods, because of the defunding the police that make communities more vulnerable, and because of bail policies that release people who are very dangerous criminals back out on the streets. Texans and Americans know they need their Second Amendment rights to defend themselves at a time when the United States government and other governments are doing less to defend our fellow Americans, and that is exactly why we should not have any further limitations of our Second Amendment rights.
I want to get to a success story in Texas. Back on March 2nd, you lifted the mask mandate.
Do you hear that? He's calling that was the bias that I already showed you 6.5 minutes, which is more than enough for anyone. But that's why I stopped the clip there. But I wanted to let you see that Chris Wallace is actually giving credit to the governor of Texas for getting rid of the mask mandate and opening everything up. And they even had like a baseball stadium with 30,000 people, mostly with no masks altogether. And their cases are down 2%. Like, that is really statistically significant? No. And even their hospitalizations are only down 15%, according to the part of that clip I didn't show you. But I think you saw enough craziness there first on the whole thing that all of a sudden Greg Abbott cares about immigrants when he didn't care about even worse treatment of immigrants back during the Trump administration. And for my longtime viewers, and I even showed a clip of me during the border crisis ? Video I showed a couple weeks ago. I showed a video of me back in 2014, I think it was, protesting against the deporter-in-chief, President Obama. So I have actually been for immigrants' rights in the Obama administration and the Trump administration and the Biden administration, not like your political hack, I think someone said, Greg Abbott. And I saw people also talking about the gun rights thing and the Second Amendment. If you have an ACLU Constitution, and I give these out, especially now that I'm ending the Sunday show in the next month, probably moving it to Monday. I'll talk more about that in the next few weeks. While supplies last, at just like a $5 contribution through PayPal or through Patreon at links down in the video description. It used to be $10 for this Constitution. This is just in the U.S. It still has to be $10 outside the U.S. because the postage is so high. But in the U.S., for $5 contribution on PayPal or through Patreon, you get this Constitution, you get this sticker, and people were talking about the Second Amendment. If you had your Constitution on page 25, you would see the 27 words of the Second Amendment. The first 13 words, which people often don't talk about, I think actually changed the meaning of the 14 words after that. It's a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Is that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state? I got it. You see, I looked right in the camera, didn't even look down. Then this is the part everyone always quotes, the gun rights people. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But actually the word regulated appears in those first 13 words, which are the unlucky 13 words of the Second Amendment for people who think that it's really more of a state militia right, not an individual right. Of course, there was a Supreme Court case decided 5-4, the Reynolds case, where Scalia wrote an opinion saying that there is an individual right to have a weapon in your own home. He said it wasn't an absolute right, which something that Biden said this last week, that they excoriated him on Fox for saying, not an absolute right. Are you crazy? Because no constitutional rights, even the right to, the First Amendment right to free speech is subject to time, place, and manner restrictions. And anyway, I wanted to respond to the people talking about the Second Amendment in the comment section. And I've been talking about the crazy Republicans, and I said this final Republican that I'm going to talk about, Liz Cheney, she's not crazy, she's evil. Well, I guess the crazy, for the old, I'm an old Dungeons and Dragons player, and I guess in Dungeons and Dragons terms, the Trump Marjorie Taylor Greene, conspiracy theory, crazy Republicans would be chaotic evil, and Liz Cheney, more your lawful evil, still evil, but just lawful, not chaotic, not crazy, but evil. I guess that is the point I'm trying to make. Any old Dungeons and Dragons fans out there, you let me know if I've correctly put the Republicans in their category, and we can talk about that a little more after we see Liz Cheney talking to Margaret Brennan about what Trump said. And then also, Matt Gaetz actually went to Wyoming to attack Liz Cheney for voting to impeach Donald Trump. And Margaret Brennan really tries to get Liz Cheney to come back at Matt Gaetz, and she refuses the opportunity at the end of this clip that I will talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, unfortunately, last night, the former president seemed to be talking in a proud way about the crowd size on January 6th. He gave the speech at Mar-a-Lago. He was the keynote speaker at the RNC fundraiser, and talked about Vice President Pence not doing more to stop the election certification, according to reports in the Times and the Post. So is he really the best messenger for the party?
The former president is using the same language that he knows provoked violence on January 6th. As a party, we need to be focused on the future. We need to be focused on embracing the Constitution, not embracing insurrection. And I think it's very important for people to realize that a fundamental part of the Constitution and of who we are as Americans is the rule of law. It's the judicial process. The election wasn't stolen. There was a judicial process in place. If you attack the judicial process and you attack the rule of law, you aren't defending the Constitution, you're at war with the Constitution. And for us as a party going forward, we have to embrace the Constitution, and we also have to put forward positive solutions. We've got to be the party of hope, of aspiration, of inspiration, the party that recognizes and understands that, the taxes need to be low, the government needs to be limited in size, a strong national defense, those substantive things, not the party of insurrection.
Speaker Pelosi just said it's up to your party to take responsibility for Congressman Matt Gaetz, who, as you know, is undergoing an ethics investigation. Are you ready to call for his resignation? Or are you going to wait?
As the mother of daughters, the charges certainly are sickening. And as the speaker noted, there's an ethics investigation underway. There are also criminal investigations underway. And I'm not going to comment further on that publicly right now, Margaret.
Were you surprised at these allegations?
I'm not going to comment further, Margaret.
Okay. Well, he is one of your chief critics, so I needed to offer you that opportunity, as you well know.
Thank you for the opportunity, Margaret.
All right, Congresswoman, we will leave it there. We'll be back with a lot more.
So what do you think? Oh, and by the way, Margaret Brennan confirmed something I talked about in some previous episodes, that she is obviously pregnant, and she was congratulated by multiple guests. I don't know what you thought about Liz Cheney in that last clip, but oh, I don't know if you can hear Sandy whining there, and I will have a Dash and Sandy clip, and I don't know what, but I did, I think, correctly describe her as lawful, right? She was really into, she was even talking about the Constitution, and as I said before I showed the clip, she refused the opportunity to go after Matt Gaetz, even though Matt Gaetz went after her. Although she said this one thing that people say that always bugs me. She says, well, because Matt Gaetz is accused of sex trafficking with underage, possibly a 17-year-old girl, that, as Christie said in that early clip I showed, we're going to see whether there's evidence of that or not. That's and the facts will tell us whether it's who's leaking it. Maybe it's coming from the lawyer from of his old friend, the tax collector, who apparently is going to flip on him. And anyway, I didn't want to go into the whole Matt Gaetz thing. But the thing that Liz Cheney said that bugs me is she said, well, as a mother of daughters, that's why I had to describe the allegations as like having sex with underage girls. Well, as the mother of daughters, of course, I'm sickened by those allegations. Well, do you have to be the mother of a daughter? Do you have to be the father? I'm the father of a daughter, but can't like anyone be sickened by the allegations against Matt Gaetz? And some of them aren't even illegal. That he on the floor of the House of Representatives, he was showing like nude photos that he'd collected to other guys in the Republican Party. He's like the worst male stereotype. Does he look like Beavis or Butthead? I wasn't a big Beavis or Butthead fan, but anyway, that's the end of those. That's all my commentary on the news clips. And Sandy has mercifully quieted down there. But I did promise a Dash and Sandy clip, and I've shown Dash and Sandy looking out one door. I guess Sandy the dog isn't done whining. I don't know what she's whining about, but Sandy the dog and Dash the cat, I showed them looking out one door a couple weeks ago and then going out a door together last week. Now I'm back to the food bowl. I took this around dinner time. You can see when I feed Sandy the dog food, I also give a piece of dog food to Dash. Sometimes Dash tries to go in, Dash the cat tries to go in and steal the dog food. Not this time, but anyway, that is the theme of the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip at the end to end with tonight. Okay, I saw people in the comments saying that someone, who was it who said that Sandy was whining because she's hangry? No, I just documented like 2 hours ago, I gave a full scoop of dog food to Sandy. Sandy the dog has definitely been fed. I don't know. Oh, and I see I've gotten some extra Super Chat contributions, Nelson 100 and Tom Trask earlier, and just now Kettle and Sinful Solutions, another one. So thank you for that financial support during the live show. I talked earlier about the Patreon and PayPal links down in the video description. Next week, I think, is actually my 8-year anniversary, and I'll talk more about how I'm winding up the show and moving it to Mondays maybe next week. I don't think I'm going to have time to make any other kind of video this week, although I guess you never know for sure. Sandy obviously wants me to finish up the show, so I guess I should just thank you all for joining me until next week. I guess I will be seeing all of you around